Good morning, Inland Empire, and welcome to another edition of Political Empire, your source for all of the latest political news happening here in Riverside and San Bernardino County. I'm Kim Pierceall with the Press Enterprise and PE.com, and we're going to get right to it today. Later on, we're going to have our experts from the Press Enterprise come in and talk about the election that just occurred, the primary, and what we face in November. But first, headlines. We have a few. John Tavallone is considered a, quote, young gun, according to the National Republican Congressional Committee after winning the primary in his 41st congressional district. Tavallone in his 60s. So apparently 60 is the new 20. Winners in the Riverside County Unified School District race. We wanted to mention that Susan Rainey, former Riverside County or Riverside City Superintendent, Jay Hoffman, former New View Superintendent, Ralph Villani, a retired teacher, and Bruce Dennis and Elizabeth Romero Toledo, both of those folks are incumbents, have been elected to the Riverside County Unified School District. Also AMR, which is the well-known ambulance company, has won a 3-year extension to its contract in Riverside County, but there's a catch. That contract is going to be bid out come 2014. It's been pretty political because there are folks on one side who say this should be bid out regularly. Primarily the city of Murrieta is saying that. And on the other side, AMR is saying, hey, we've been around for quite some time. It ain't broke. Why do we need to bid out? So again, AMR gets 3 more years, but that contract will be bid out again in 2014. And then finally, what is a vote worth? Based on what happened during the primary election, we took a look at the election records through May and essentially how much the candidates had to spend per vote that they won in the primary. In the 31st Congressional District, we had Gary Miller, who his campaign spent about $95.63 per vote. Bob Dutton, in second, spent about $11.99 per vote. And Pete Aguilar, the Democrat who did not win the primary, will not be going to the general election, he spent $28.41. At the 31st State Senate race, which was pretty contentious with 2 Democrats running, Richard Roth spent $46 per vote. Steve Clute spent $25, and Jeff Miller, the Republican incumbent, spent less than $6. So Jeff Miller will be contending with Richard Roth in the November race. In other races, San Bernardino County, the 3rd district, James Ramos, spent $36.26 per vote. Neil Derry spent $32.25 per vote, and Jim Bagley, who really didn't mount much of a campaign but got quite a few votes considering, spent about $1.13 per vote. Josie Gonzalez, who ran in the 5th district and ran away with that election with more than a majority, so she will not have to run in November, had $20.26 spent per vote. Riverside Mayor Ed Atkinson spent about $23.94 per vote. Rusty Bailey, $9.32 per vote. So it did cost quite a bit to mount some of these campaigns during the primary. And now, after this break, we're going to come back with all of our experts from Washington, D.C., from Sacramento, and from in studio in here in the Riverside office to talk about all of those important races and basically give folks an idea as to what they should expect in November. And with our first update on how things fared during the primary election and what folks are going to see in November, we've got Ben Goad from Washington, D.C. Ben, thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet.
And tell us a little bit about some of these key races, because there were quite a few congressional races, key races, and who won? Give folks an update, and what's going to go on in November? What are people going to expect to see from these candidates come November?
Sure. So the biggest surprise, of course, was in the 31st Congressional District, where 2 Republicans, Congressman Gary Miller and State Senator Bob Dutton, finished in the top 2 spots, meaning one of those guys is going to represent the Democratic-leaning district there in the San Bernardino Valley. The other surprise for me was in the High Desert, where Tea Party favorite Greg Imus was the top vote getter among 13 candidates. No one really knew how that race was going to play out, but Imus was not exactly considered a front-runner, so he'll face off against a fellow Republican, Assemblyman Paul Cook, this November. And I'll take you through a couple of the other races. There are also 2 members of the same party squaring off in the 35th Congressional District. Democrats, Congressman Joe Baca, who got around 45% of the vote, and Senator State Senator Gloria Negrete-McLeod, who got about 36%. As expected, it'll be Republican John Tavallone against Mark Takano, a Democrat in the 41st Congressional District, which is Riverside, Moreno Valley, Paris area. Tavallone finished 8 or 9 points ahead in the primary. And to the east, there's Republican Congresswoman Mario Bono Mack will face off against Democrat Raul Ruiz in the 36th Congressional District. In the 42nd, which is Corona, Murrieta, that area, Republican Congressman Ken Calvert easily won. He'll go up against Democrat Michael Williamson in November. And finally, down in the 50th, which is includes Temecula and a big chunk of San Diego County, Congressman Duncan Hunter, who's another Republican, really ran away with the primary. He got almost 68% of the vote, and he'll see Democrat David Secor in November.
Great. Well, Ben, thanks so much for that update on all of the races. And we're, of course, going to be keeping an eye on what's going on up until November in the general election. Thanks so much for being here. And we are going to get updates as well from our Sacramento correspondent, as well as our San Bernardino, Riverside County, and City of Riverside correspondents to talk about their races and what we should expect for November.
This is Jim Miller from the Press Enterprise Sacramento Bureau, and I am going to update you on some of the legislative contests and outcomes from last week and what's in store for November. In San Bernardino County, we had the 33rd Assembly District, where Assemblyman Tim Donnelly was the top finisher out of 3 candidates and will be facing Democrat John Coffey. In the 47th Assembly District, we also Councilman Joe Baca Jr. Finishing atop fellow Democrat Cheryl Brown. And in the moving south into Riverside County, we have in the Assembly Water Board member Phil Pauly was the top finisher over Lake Elsinore Councilwoman Melissa Melendez. And the 60th Assembly District, western Riverside County, we had School Board member Jose Perez, Democrat, atop Republican Eric Linder. And 61st Assembly District, Jose Medina, Riverside teacher, Democrat, over Moreno Valley Councilman Bill Beatty. And then perhaps the region's biggest race last week was Jeff Miller, Assemblyman, Republican, finished atop businessman Richard Roth, a Democrat. And that race, looking ahead to November, the race in the 31st Senate District is going to be a hot one for the region. Both parties are fully engaged, and the equally competitive contests will be in the 61st Assembly District between Medina and Bill Beatty. And then we also have a couple races where members of the same party will be running against each other in the fall. That will be the case in the 67th Assembly District with Phil Pauly and Melissa Melendez, both Republicans, and then back up into San Bernardino County with Joe Baca Jr. and Cheryl Brown, who are both Democrats, who will be squaring off in November. And that's what we have to look forward to, and this is Jim Miller from Sacramento.
Hi, I'm Alicia Robinson, Riverside City Hall reporter for the Press Enterprise and PE.com, and I've been reporting on the race to replace Riverside Mayor Ron Loveridge. After the June 5th election, the race is now moving into a new phase, which will be a November runoff between Ward 3 Councilman Rusty Bailey and former Councilman Ed Adkisson, who represented Ward 5 from about 2000 to 2007. Both of the candidates are starting to look at parts of the city where they didn't win on June 5th to see where they can pick up more votes for November. Ward 1 Councilman Mike Gardner carried his ward, so that will be up for grabs. And then also Ward 2 Councilman Andy Melendrez won the most votes in his ward. So the candidates in the runoff will probably be looking for votes there as well. But the big prize will be Ward 4, which is by far the most populous ward and was split between Ed and Rusty on June 5th. Endorsements could be a big help. Mike Gardner is expected to announce which one of the 2 candidates he's endorsing sometime this week, and Mayor Ron Loveridge's endorsement will also be highly coveted. And then the rest of the council also may be endorsing, with the exception of Ward 5 Councilman Chris MacArthur, who has already backed Ed Adkisson. And as Mayor Ron Loveridge has noted, November could be a whole different ballgame because we're expecting many more voters to be participating in that election than voted on June 5th.
Hi, my name is Jeff Horseman. I'm a reporter with the Press Enterprise and PE.com covering Riverside County government. And today I'm going to be talking about the upcoming District 1 Board of Supervisors race. And looking at the primary, what's really interesting is there's a real division in the northern end of the district and the southern end of the district between the two candidates, incumbent Bob Buster and his challenger, Assemblyman Kevin Jeffries. Buster tended to do really well in the Riverside area, kind of the northern end and, kind of Lake Matthews area. Whereas Kevin Jeffries, who represents Lake Elsinore, Wildomar, that area up in Sacramento as an assemblyman, he actually did quite well there. So you see a real kind of division between the northern end and the southern end of District 1, which also, incidentally, the northern end tends to be more Democratic and the southern end is more Republican in terms of the voter makeup. Mr. Buster did poll well in Latino areas. The pro-Buster precincts average about 49% of the population, where he got the majority of the vote, while the precincts that tended to go for Kevin Jeffries tended to be more white in their makeup. One key, I think, to this race is going to be the votes that went for the third place finisher, who's not going to be in the runoff, Mike Subaru. He got about 30% of the vote or so. And the key is going to be, was that purely an anti-Bob Buster vote, or is it, now that it's down to two candidates in Buster and Jeffries, are the people who voted for Subaru, or are they going to tend to go for Jeffries or go for Buster? Mike Subaru did do well in the Orange Crest and Woodcrest areas in Riverside, winning some precincts there. But the bottom line is this is going to be probably a very spirited battle between Bob Buster and Kevin Jeffries. They're both veteran politicians. They're both very well funded incumbents, and I think what you're going to see, maybe Kevin Jeffries trying to portray Bob Buster as because he's been there on the board since '93 as a out of touch politician, unresponsive. He's got that fat cat pension. While Bob Buster might try to turn around and say, hey, Kevin Jeffries, he's up in Sacramento, and voters, you remember how much you hate Sacramento. Do we really need another Sacramento politician down here in Riverside? So it's going to be an interesting race. Look forward to covering it. And once again, you can turn to the Press Enterprise and PE.com for comprehensive coverage on this race. I'm Jeff Horseman, and thank you very much.
All right, this is Imran Gori from the Press Enterprise. I'm here to talk about the San Bernardino County supervisorial races. We're going to be looking at runoff elections in two of the races after last week's elections. The runoffs are going to be happening in the 1st District in the High Desert and in the 3rd District in the East Valley area that includes Redlands and all the way out to the mountain and desert areas. In the 1st District, the runoff is going to be between Apple Valley Councilman Rick Rowley and businessman Robert Lovingood. Now in the 3rd District, which is probably the most closely watched race, we have incumbent Supervisor Neil Derry facing a challenge from former San Manuel Tribal Chairman James Ramos, who took the lead in last week's election with 47% to Derry's 33%, while former 29 Palms Mayor Jim Bagley got 20%. Now, we've done some mapping and analysis of the voting patterns from last week's election, and it showed that Ramos did best with the Latino and Democratic voters, and all three candidates did well with in the Republican precincts. Now, Ramos also did really well in a lot of the valley cities like Redlands and Highland and Loma Linda, while Derry did better in some of the outlying mountain and desert areas. So both campaigns are going to be looking at that data to try and see how they'll do in November. The Ramos campaign is saying these numbers look good for them because they did well in a climate that should have been better for Derry because it's a low turnout election that tends to favor conservative voters. The Derry campaign has said that with Bagley in the race, that split some of the conservative vote and that they hope to consolidate that in November.
Thank you to all of our political correspondents here at the Press Enterprise, stretching from Washington, D.C. to our Riverside newsroom and up in Sacramento, who gave us an update on what's going on during the primary, what happened, and what is going to be happening come November. And thank you for watching yet another edition of Political Empire. I'm your host, Kim Pierceall, and we'll see you next time.